hours.
Unless there's some sort of a delay going on. No, that's the schedule.
They take Megabus from Ann Arbor now. Bus
We had some friends who took Megabus, and their experience wasn't always that great, but people have problems occasionally on the train. Train was phenomenal. You're sitting in first class seats. You can get up. You can walk around. There's a lounge car at the end. You can get something to eat. It's like it's got all the advantages.
Did you get in on the train at Royal Oak?
No, actually, Dearborn. It's closer to here to Dearborn. It's quicker to here to Dearborn than it is to there, so we went from Dearborn. And it cost less.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Sorry I wasn't able to make it last week. Thank God we're doing much better, so that's good. Okay, so tonight's class is about Moshiach and Moshiach coming. This is the class that was meant to be last week. I thought it was a topic that we shouldn't skip. So, actually, my daughter, one of my daughters, is in school. So my kids go to a Chabad school, and one of the terms of in Chabad is a term called mivtzoyim. So mivtzoyim is the plural of a mivtza, and a mivtza could translate as a campaign. So the Rebbe had campaigns. This is actually 50 years since the first campaign. Now the idea is like the Rebbe had mitzvah campaigns. That's right. It's like gets a little close to words. A mitzvah is different than a mivtza, but the two letters changing order, in the sound. So there were mitzvah campaigns. The first being the campaign of Tefillin, which was prior to the Six-Day War in 1967. So we're in the 50th year of the campaign of putting on Tefillin. And my daughter asked me about all the different mitzvah campaigns, all the different campaigns to spread mitzvahs. So the last campaign, so to say, the big one at the end is the campaign of Moshiach. The Rebbe wanted his Chassidim should learn about Moshiach and teach about Moshiach and be active in the campaign to bring Moshiach. Even though last week, for health reasons, I had to miss, but I thought the topic was something certainly that it's a very important campaign to the Rebbe. So we're going back in time to last week's class to cover it. So tonight's class is about Moshiach, and the point of tonight's class is how we have to want Moshiach to come. And in order for Moshiach to come, there's a process that the world must go through in order for Moshiach's arrival. And the point of tonight's class will show how we are the ones that have to carry out the work. And we have to want it, we have to yearn for it, we have to work towards it, and it's all something which is dependent on us. Now this is, like I said from last week, this is a Parshas Vayechi, class. So it's the last Parsha in the book of Genesis. In the present, the topic we're not doing, which maybe I'll catch up next week, eventually we'll catch up the present, we'll see, is Parsha Shmos. We started a brand new book, a brand new season of Torah studies, but for now, we're still with last week's topic. Okay, so here's how we're going to start tonight. I'm going to start with a question. Get your guys, the juice is flowing, so to say, get your minds going. So the idea is like this. If you had the opportunity to ask God any question that was on your mind, if you had a one-on-one audience where you had time before God to ask him a question, what would you ask? If you could ask God himself anything and God would answer, what question would you ask? Okay, so we'll start this way.
How my mother and my other relatives are doing that are deceased.
Okay. All right. So an update on your loved ones.
Yeah.
So that's a good question.
Funny, I would have said pretty much something along the same lines, other than, what are we waiting for would be my question.
Okay. How's this all going to end?
This is, what's the last chapter look like?
We fast forward to the end. All right. Good.
Why me?
Why me? All right. Profound question.
I'd like to know how it's all built and works, and because obviously we don't see how everything works, and I want to see how everything works, how it's built, where we're going, and what's the purpose. And
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That means you get a lot of time with God. That's a long answer, you know.
Well, just show me the blueprint.
How does all this work, you know? It's a good one.
Yeah, I wonder, I was asked, how, the world as we know it, how long and what's gonna, how it's gonna unfold and for how long and how it's gonna end also.
All right.
Same
Okay, good. So,
however long it lasts, 1,000 years or 1,000 years.
Right. So we have looking, I guess, to the past to know how it is in the present, and looking to the future, and looking to the inside of things. Why me? How does all this work? These are all excellent questions. So tonight's class, the first text that we start off with in tonight's class is an account of a person who had such an opportunity. See, the Baal Shem Tov merited to have an otherworldly experience. And in this otherworldly experience, he describes, once it's all over, what happened. He writes a letter to his brother-in-law. Oh, that's good, thank you. What is the PowerPoint slide, right? Here we go, thank you. So, he had such an opportunity, and he was able to describe in writing how the experience went. Now, this otherworldly experience of the Baal Shem Tov is known in mystical terminology as an aliyas haneshama, an elevation of the soul. And in a conscious level, the soul elevated on high, and in this moment, he was, in heaven, and he was experiencing a powerful revelation. So the first text number 1, you have it in your printout, you have it up on the screen. The first text number 1 for tonight, is the letter of the Baal Shem Tov that he wrote to his brother-in-law describing the experience. So the English translation of the letter reads, on Rosh Hashanah of the year 5,507. So this is 270 years ago. I performed, by means of an oath, an elevation of soul, an aliyas haneshama, to the higher spiritual realms, as known to you, and saw wondrous things I had never seen before. I ascended from level to level until I entered the chamber of the Moshiach, where he learns Torah with all the sages and the righteous. I saw great joy there. At first I thought that the reason for this joy was because I had passed away from the physical world, heaven forbid. Later they told me that my time had not yet come to die, since they have great pleasure on high from what I am doing below. So in this experience, Baal Shem Tov continues and says, I asked the Moshiach. This is Baal Shem Tov's moment. He has a question to ask Moshiach. What did he ask? When will the Master come? He answered, this is how you will know. When your teaching will become public and revealed in the world, and your wellsprings will burst forth to the farthest extremes. The Baal Shem Tov described his reaction. I was stunned and distressed. This could be so long. When will it just finally be? So again, if we do the math on the year that he describes here at the beginning of the text, this is something which is 270 years ago. And he's asking Moshiach when he'll come, and he tells him certain conditions. But really, he doesn't tell him a clear answer. The Baal Shem Tov asked a question which is similar to some of the questions around the table here tonight. When's it all going to end? When is Moshiach going to come? When is the day that we've longed we've longed for such a extended period of time? When will it finally happen? And rather than getting a clear answer, Moshiach gives him conditions. If this will happen, and when this will happen, when that will happen, that's when I'll come. So instead of being able to put it down on the calendar, instead of being able to come back with a clear report to his brother-in-law when Moshiach will come, the Baal Shem Tov has to settle for this, distressing, as he writes, response. So we ask tonight here, is there a date? If we could corner Moshiach, if we could have God himself, answer the question, could we be more clever in figuring out when is the date certain end? When will it all happen? Is there a time which is determined for Moshiach's arrival? Now, this date, if it in fact exists, if there is in fact a date certain when Moshiach will come, does anyone know when it is? And if that person knows, well, why don't they tell us? Well, we could be preparing. Now, the reason we're asking this question, the reason we're talking about this, again, as if last week it was Parshas Vayechi, if we were meeting the regular scheduled time, then we would have a similar experience, a similar question, a similar desire to know the end of days, and the story of Yaakov, the story of Jacob, and his last messages to his children. Now, at the end of last week's Torah portion is when Yaakov passes away, and prior to Yaakov passing away, he blesses all of his children. He calls for his sons to be brought to him, and he blesses them, and he tells them about their story, their destiny. Now, Yaakov did, in that moment, seek to reveal to his children, we learn, the exact date of Mashiach's arrival, when Mashiach will come. And as Yaakov is about to do the big reveal, let them know when it's going to happen, the Torah tells us that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, was removed from him. He lost track of what he was trying to say. God took the words right out of his mouth, and Yaakov had to move on to another topic. So that's the next text 2a, which is from the book of Genesis, the very end of the Torah portion, at the very end of the first book. It's from chapter 49, verse 1. Now here's the questions we have for tonight. Do we have a date? When, in fact, is Mashiach coming? You see this troubled-looking fellow over here, pulling out his hair, wondering when's it going to happen. And we're asking ourselves, why do we have this unclear answer from Mashiach to the Baal Shem Tov? So the next text 2a, it reads, Jacob called for his sons and said, gather, and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days. Ba'achris hayamim, at the end of days. So on this expression, ba'achris hayamim, at the end of days, what does the end of days refer to? Now, we'll soon see in the next few texts that there's a few different ways to go with this. But Rashi, in his explanation, says that the end of days means that it's talking about the end of exile, when Mashiach will come. So on the words, V'agido lachem, and I will tell you, Rashi explains on those words that he, meaning Yaakov, attempted to reveal the end of the exile. But the Shekhinah withdrew from him, so he began to say other things. So what seems to be the case as you read through these texts, as you read from last week's Torah portion, you read from Rashi's explanation of it, that there in fact is a set date when Moshiach will come. And Yaakov was ready to reveal it. Yaakov, through his prophecy, was ready to reveal to his sons. But God stopped. He stopped him, took away the revelation. So we're left to wonder, here we are, like Moshiach, like the Baal Shem Tov, we're coming excited to hear a class about when Moshiach is coming. 270 years later from the Baal Shem Tov, this question, we want to know, what's the date going to come? Maybe it's before this Friday. Before things change here in America, Moshiach could already come already. So, when's it going to happen? Now, what day was Yaakov going to reveal? Now, the next text, which we're going to see, is that the Talmud tells us that there are certain things, like the coming of Mashiach, that are meant to be concealed. Mm-hmm. Man isn't meant to know the answer to certain things. So, This is the verse we just quoted from verse text 2a, and this is Rashi's explanation. So we're now going to see from the next text 3, about this concept that not everything is meant to be revealed. This is from the Talmud, Tractate Pesachim, the 54th page on the second side there in the Talmud, and it tells us that our rabbis taught 7 things are hidden from mankind. It gives us the list. First of all, the first thing that is hidden from us is the day of death. Now, I'll give you a little quick rundown as to why we're not meant to know these things. This isn't the topic for tonight, the first 5 things, but the first one, it says that you're not supposed to know the day that you die. Now, this is in order so that you don't push off doing tshuva, you don't push off fixing things. If you know when you pass away, you say, I've got a long time, I could live it up, and then at the end I'll fix everything. So if you don't know when you're going to pass away, you'll live your life constantly in a mode of repair. The next thing is not everyone is supposed to know is the day of consolation, meaning your own personal consolation from your own struggles, your own problems. And this, again, will encourage a person to constantly turn to God in their time of need. If you know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and you know exactly when you're going to get to that light, then you just ride it out. But if you don't know exactly when it'll be, then you'll turn to God for his help. The next thing is the exactness of judgment. We don't know the precise judgment as to who is righteous and who is wicked. So we'll be constantly working on ourselves to improve. We don't know what another person is thinking. This is in order to preserve the free choice that each of us have. If we knew what everyone's plans were in their deep recesses of their mind, then we might try to foil their plans or frustrate them. So that's number 4. Number 5 is we don't know how a person will earn a living. We don't know what profession you'll end up in and what your work and what your calling in life is. So the last 2, for tonight's class, the one that are relevant for our topic is we do not know when the kingdom of David will return. That's the times of Moshiach. And we don't know, this is the flip side of number 6, we don't know when the evil rule of the current exile will end. So we have this idea that Yaakov has a date, seemingly. He wants to reveal it. God conceals it at the last moment. And the Talmud comes to inform us that this is all part of the plan. These are all things we're not supposed to know. Certain things are supposed to be concealed. Now, I don't know about you guys, the phenomenon of like unexpected guests. This is especially challenging in a busy household like mine when there's 9 kids running in every direction, you know. There's only 6 directions you could go, and so you can imagine if there's 9, you know, like make up new directions to be running. And so if you have an unexpected guest, you're not prepared, you're not ready for them to come. So imagine, you know, Moshiach is like the great unexpected guest. There's a joke that says Moshiach finally arrived. And it's the day the Moshiach finally comes. It's big news. Everybody's excited. The world's changing. And Moshiach goes around to all the different Jewish communities and visits. He finally comes. So he comes to the study hall, and he sees the people there, the Talmudei Chachamim, the ones who've been learning, spending their life learning. And he comes to them, and they say, "Oh, Moshiach, we're so happy you finally came." And he says, "Yeah, here I am." And he says, "Moshiach, we want to tell you a Dvar Torah. We want to, in honor of your coming, we want to tell you a piece of Torah, what we've been learning." Moshiach, by all means, I'd love to hear it. So they start getting over their Dvar Torah. Now Moshiach is listening and smiling and proud of the hard work. And they finish their Dvar Torah, and they ask, "No, Moshiach, what did you think?" So Moshiach is himself a great Talmud Chacham, a great leader in learning, and he says, "Well, it was an excellent Dvar Torah, it was well prepared, but there were a couple points where you were missing the opinion of this great sage, and on this question over here, you forgot about the answer already given by this great sage. So it was good, but it could have been better." He said, "Oh, but Moshiach, if only he would have waited a little bit longer, then the Dvar Torah would have been better. So he comes to the Chassidic Farbrengen. He comes to the Chassidim. They're sitting around. They're celebrating. They're singing and dancing. They're saying L'chaim. Mashiach comes to the Chassidim. And he says, here we are. And he says, Moshiach, welcome. You're so great that you're here. Here, let us pour you a l'chaim. So they pour Moshiach a l'chaim. Moshiach, so they makes a bracha, drinks the l'chaim. He says, no, Moshiach, what do you think? He says, well, it was a really small l'chaim you gave me. What happened? He says, well, Moshiach, if only you would have come sooner, there would have been more. So, we don't want to be unprepared when Mashiach comes, one way or the other. It would be good to know. Why can't we know? I think get a little heads up about when Mashiach will come. So, this is part number one. This is our setup. So, we have in Parshas Vayechi, we have the story of Yaakov. We have the story of the Baal Shem Tov. We have, in both cases, this desire to know when Mashiach will come. In the letter of the Baal Shem Tov, it's an answer which is not clear. It's a stunning and distressing answer, as the Baal Shem Tov writes, because it's conditional on something. We have a biblical story of Yaakov trying to reveal when Mashiach will come to his children as well, and at the last moment, Hashem takes away this knowledge, and he's not able to say it. So in both cases, we're asking really the same question: is why can't we know when Mashiach will come? All right, any questions on the first part so far? No? Okay, so before we answer our questions, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what Rashi taught us about Yaakov. Now, that's the next text, the text in text 4a. This is the Re'im to Rashi, or the Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, which is one of the commentaries on Rashi's commentaries. Now, the Re'im is asking a question like this. What is it? I told you we were going to get later to how different ways to understand the end of days. What is it about this expression, the end of days, that compels Rashi to explain it as a reference to the coming of Mashiach? The end of days could be less specific. It could be more general, like what's going to happen in the future. Or it could be specific, but specific to the context of what's going on at the time. So again, what I told you is the context of what's going on is that Yaakov is talking to his sons, and he's telling them about their destinies. So the end of days, rather than it being this global transformation of the coming of Mashiach, the end of days could simply be what's going to happen to his children, to his sons. So that's the next text, text 4a. The Mizrahi's question is, I don't understand what compelled Rashi to say this, to say that the end of days is talking about Mashiach. Why can't the words, I will tell you what will happen to you, be understood as a reference to what will happen in the future to each of the tribes? Now in text 4b, we have another one of the commentaries on the Chumash, another one of the rabbis who explain the meaning of the verses of the 5 books of Moses, and it says, this is the Rashbam, and he gives a very literal and down-to-earth reading of the verse. So when it says, Ba'achris hayamim, at the end of days, the Rashbam explains, what does that mean? What's going to be their strength and their inheritances. So this simple explanation fits, like I said, in context. It fits with the flow of the story. Yaakov has his children by their bedside, and who's going to get what section of the land of Israel, and what are you going to be good at, and what are you meant to do? This one's meant to be a merchant, and this one's meant to be a border guard, and this one's meant to be teachers. What's going to be at the end of days for you? So in both cases, text 4a and 4b, they're essentially asking the same question on Rashi. What is it about this verse that pushes you, Rashi, to explain it as a reference to the coming of Mashiach? Okay, so Rashi's a little bit on the ropes, right? You've got their aim and their Rashbam, they're coming at Rashi and wondering what's going on. So the Kli Yakar, the next text, text 5a, the Kli Yakar suggests a way to learn Rashi, a way to resolve these questions for Rashi. Now, in order to see the answer of the Kli Yakar, let's go back to text 49, chapter 49, verse 1 over there, our text that Rashi is trying to explain. And he says, Yaakov called for his sons and said, gather, and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days. Now, this word gather, the Hebrew word is he'asfu, an asifa. That's one word in Hebrew for gathering, an asifa. Now, in the next text, text 5b, what the Kliyakar explains over here is that at the very next verse of 49:2, when it says gather again in the translation, there it's a word of hikavsu. So there's ha'aslu and hikatslu. Now, you have a kibbutz and an asifa. And both words are different words, but they're both translated as gather. So, gather, if you read the verse just in the English, gather, it seems like Yaakov is repeating himself. Now, by now, you guys are longtime students of mine, you should already realize what's coming next, is that whenever the verse is seemingly repetitive, then that's there to screaming that there's more here, there's more to it. So, if it says gather, and one gather is an asifa, and one gather is a kibbutz, what's the difference between these types of gatherings? And why do we need both? Or, what's missing? So the idea over here that the Kliyakar is going to explain is that there are two types of gathering. The first gathering, when we say an asifa, he'asvu, that is a private gathering. Whereas a kibbutz, hikatsvu, that is a more public gathering. So when he says gather, it's two forms, two modes of gathering. That's text. That's the next text from the Kliyakar, and the translation of the text reads: the term applies to one situated in a public place. This first term of gathering applies to someone who's in a public place, who then moves inside to a more private place. As in the verse, you shall bring it into your house, and no one takes me home. In both of those cases, the gathering over there is the word of asif. But this term refers to people spread out who merely gather together, even if it will be out in the open. That's the word of kibbutz. So why do we have to choose gatherings? And how is this going to help Rashi? So the Kliyakar continues. At first, Yaakov wished to reveal to his children the time of Moshiach's arrival. And such a secret cannot be revealed in a public place, lest someone unworthy should hear it. For a secret of God is only for those who fear him. The expression goes. So therefore he said, gather, he'asfu, and in a private way, and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days. And immediately he felt that the matter was hidden from him, so he changed his wording and said, gather, hikatsvu, in a public way, sons of Jacob, to hear words that are not secret and can be spoken in public. Okay. So now we see, based on the Kliyakar, that these two types of expressions for gathering, the reason they come is in order to tell us this multi-step process, multi-step story. First, it was meant to be private information, and then once the private information was removed from Yaakov, it was hidden from him, then it became public information. And that's when he continues by giving over all of the public information, which is the destiny of his children. But the world's destiny, this secret matter, which the Talmud says people aren't supposed to know, that was something which was meant to be said in private. And once it's gone, it became just a thing of public information. So,
I have a question.
Yes.
Thanks to verse text 5:8.
Yeah.
Where he says, gather and listen, sons of Jacob.
Yeah.
So that was him identifying himself as their father. And then he calls himself Israel.
Right.
Listen to Israel, your father. So that's when he's going to tell the information?
Correct. Well, no. The Jacob is the first one, which is the private information. And then he says, sons of Jacob, listen to Israel, your father, which is in the second verse. It actually has both names. Okay. Is there a question at home? Or no? Okay. Fine. So that's the second part. So we just got a little bit of a deeper dive into why Rashi is compelled to learn that this is about Moshiach, and so now we know it's from a deeper reading of the double language in the verses.
So did he tell his sons in private?
No, he didn't. According to Rashi, it was information that even he didn't know anymore.
Okay, so it's not that he told them, but we don't know what he told them.
Right.
So this is sort of the term I used before, reverse engineering, where they basically said, okay, now it becomes a public offering. Now we can go do this,
Yeah.
change what it was. So starting with it being public, that says what information you can put out there. And when it was private, you had to infer backwards that it was stuff that shouldn't be revealed.
Exactly.
So starting with what would be the conclusion, you work backwards.
Exactly. Okay. So now we're going to move on to part 3. Now, I'm going to introduce a term which is called kitzim. Kitzim is the plural of a kate. Now, a kate, as a Hebrew word, means an end. Now, when we use the term kitzim, these are the ends of days that have been predicted by our sages throughout Jewish history. So there is this phenomenon where the rabbis or great sages will, in their times, reveal a case, reveal a predicted end of days. And this is something throughout history that's happened in Judaism. Now, I don't have to, I probably can't go very deep with the time we have, and I don't need to go very deep probably with the audience I have here, but, throughout history, things have been tough for the Jewish people. There have been, very trying times for the Jewish people throughout our long history. Lots of suffering and hardship and periods of expulsion and pogroms and Holocaust and just a long history of difficulties. Now, in the face of difficulties, this is something you see even today. You can talk to someone who lived through the Holocaust or struggles through the mystery of that great suffering. It is a challenge to a person's faith. It could be a challenge to the faith of a community. It could be, to the entire people of a certain time when you face great challenge, great struggle. So this idea of a case, of the rabbis revealing predictions of when the end will finally come, is, in one way you could explain it, is a form of encouraging the people to make it through, right? If you've ever been struggling through a difficult period in your own personal life, you might become despondent and want to give up. But if someone could just tell you, I know with certainty that tomorrow will be better, and this good thing will happen to you tomorrow, that will give you the strength to push through the difficult times which are going on right now. It's when you think that this difficulty will never end that you give up hope. So throughout Jewish history, there have been times when people have done exactly that. They've given up hope. They've lost their faith, and along comes some great sage and tells them there will be a greater end, and, and be encouraged, be strengthened to make it to that better time. Now, this function of providing strength and encouragement to people struggling is what the Rambam explains in the next text. We'll see text number 6. What the Rambam explains in a famous letter called the Geras Teman, where he writes a letter to the Yemenite community and also to bolster them and strengthen them. Now, this is the kitzim, the calculating the end of days. So the idea of a case is to establish certain dates, and these dates are established not as definitive periods, so it's not like this is certainly going to happen. These aren't promises that are made by the sages, but they're saying that these are certain dates which are more propitious times, more auspicious times for the coming of Moshiach, and the reason it's not guaranteed is because even though this is a time which is more fit for Moshiach to come, ultimately it's dependent on our work. And the point of encouraging people to make it through the struggling time is that they'll continue to do that very work. So this is the idea of the Kitzim. So let's see text number 6 from Maimonides, the Ageres Taimon. So in this letter, the Maimonides, the Rambam, is defending a prediction of an end which was made by Reb Sadia Gaon. Now, just a little side thing before we read text number 6, is that just like Moshiach's story that we started tonight's class with the Baal Shem Tov for 270 years later, if you go back through the history of Kitzim predicted by our rabbis, many of them have come and gone. We passed those times. So Reb Sadia Gaon, who was preceded at the time of the Rambam by many years, made such a prediction, and here they are after the fact. And and when you predict something, and the point is to try to encourage people, and then it doesn't happen, it could be doubly, discouraging. So that's what the Rambam's task is over here, is to defend Reb Sadia Gaon. So he says, in defense of Reb Sadia Gaon, of blessed memory, who calculated these kitzim, he calculated in the end times, though the Reb Sadia Gaon knew that this practice is frowned upon, he was compelled to do so. For the people of a generation were full of crisis of faith and would have all but given up the Jewish religion if not for him, uniting the masses by calculating in times to truly strengthen their hope. So this case is not meant, again, like we said in the previous slide, not meant to be definitive, not meant to say that this is guaranteed to happen in the future, but it's meant to make a time that's more likely to happen. And it's in order to encourage us to do the work, to be worthy of it happening. But like I said, unfortunately, these times have come and gone, and Moshiach's not here. So if you say that it's time because we have to do the work, that means that we didn't finish the task. Now, in the next text, this is from a sefer called Netzach Yisrael, which is from the Maharal, or Yehuda Lau, Maharal of Prague. And in that book, Netzach Yisrael, he says when the sages predicted a case, it's not as if they were definitively decreeing that it will come at that given time and hour. Rather, they revealed to us a time that was ripe for the case to occur. The case, the end, is one of those secret matters that cannot be revealed definitively. That's going back to the Talmudic text which we read earlier. So, where does this come from? So if we have this kind of struggle, this balance between hope and encouragement and discouragement and crisis of faith and how the case works. So the first case we actually see is in the Torah, in the book of Daniel, the book of Daniel. So that's the next text, text 8a, chapter 12 of the book of Daniel, verses 5 through 13. We're going to see a little bit of a longer text, but there's a prediction of Moshiach coming there. So let's see the translation of the book of Daniel. It reads, "And I, Daniel, saw, and behold, two others were standing, one on this side of the riverbank and one on that side of the riverbank. And he said to the man clad in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be until the secret end? And I heard the man clad in linen, who was above the waters of the river, and he raised his right hand and his left hand to the heavens, and he swore by the life of the world, that in a time of 2 times and a half, and when they have ended shattering the strength of the holy people, all these will end." And Daniel continues, "And I heard, but I did not understand, and I said, my Lord, what is the end of these? And from the time the daily sacrifice was removed and the silent abomination placed is 1,290. And it continues with the verse and says, "Fortunate is he who waits and reaches days of 1,335. And you go to the end, and you will rest and rise to your lot at the end of days." So we have numbers and historical events and all types of things right here in the book of Daniel predicting an end. So Rashi, in the next text in your handout, 8b, Rashi explains when the starting point of the count is. So Rashi explains in 8b, says 1,290 years from the time of the Talmud offering ceased, which means the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, until it will return with the coming of Moshiach. Okay, let's do a little bit of math over here. So the next text it already has the answer, right? This is like math homework for middle school, right? Let's do the math problem, but the answer's in the back of the book, and don't look, right? So the way this works is Rashi's explaining is that the Jewish year, if you add the 1,290 years to a certain event, you'll have the year that Mashiach will come. Now, what's the date we're looking for over here? So if we have the destruction of the Second Temple, so there's some debate historically exactly when that was, whether 69 or 70 of the Common Era. So we take 69 or 70, whichever one it is, and you add 1,290 years later, so then you have 1360 if it's 70. So that's what 8c over here says. Nachmanides, the Ramban explains, says this will be in the Hebrew year 5,118. Just for reference, we're in 5,777. So this is already a 600-year miss. From the time the Talmud offering ceased until its restoration are 1,290 years. He does the math for you. Now, Rambam, just as a second example of a case, so you have Daniel. Now you have another case. The Rambam says, text number 9. So in the same letter that we read before, it says, we have a wonderful and expansive tradition that prophecy will return to Israel in the Hebrew year 4,976, or 1,216 on the secular calendar. And it's without doubt that the return of prophecy is a precursor to Mashiach. This is more accurate than any other calculated end time. So Rambam also gets in on the story. Now, Rambam passed away in 1,204 of the Common Era. So, if he's giving this prediction, it's not far off from the time that he lived. So if we're talking about encouraging the people of the times, this must have been encouraging. Imagine you were waiting, the title of tonight's class, and I told you it's going to be just 20 years from now, or it's right around the corner. It would be encouraging. Another case of the Rambam, but something that is, again, unfortunately, far away. And we're here now, these hundreds of years later, and it still hasn't happened. So if these kitzim, these predictions of the end of days from our rabbis are estimates or auspicious times when it could happen, so then we could suggest what Yaakov was doing was not giving a prediction. He was going to say, date certain. He was going to tell his son what was unique about what Yaakov did, because other rabbis, and even Daniel in the Torah itself, gave a prediction, and that wasn't withheld from them. There was even some positive reason to do it, in order to encourage the people at the time. But so if Yaakov was withheld, or held back by God from doing it, then there was something different about what Yaakov wanted to reveal. Yaakov wasn't revealing an auspicious time. Yaakov was giving something more certain. And that's why it was hidden from him. Now, but if you think about it, that also seems unlikely. Because if Yaakov, here we are in 5,777 on the Hebrew calendar, Yaakov passed away in 2,255 of the Hebrew calendar. So if we would compare what Yaakov was trying to do to what the other rabbis have done, the other rabbis were giving times that it could work out, but it wasn't certain, and that was allowed. If Yaakov was giving something certain, but that was what was held back from him, that maybe makes sense in the way we're trying to work out this problem tonight. But if you think about it from the other side, that seems unlikely also for Yaakov to do this. Because if we do the math, 5,777, right? and subtract the year he passed away, 2,255. So we're talking about over 3,500 years. So what kind of good news is that? If Yaakov is on his deathbed telling his sons, I've got something to tell you. Moshiach is going to come 3,500 years from now. How is that going to inspire them? What would you react to if I told you, I said before, I'm thinking about your own personal struggles. If someone tries to encourage you and says tomorrow is going to be better, this isn't tomorrow. This is 3,000 years later. You're not going to live to see when it's going to be better. Your children and your grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren and on and on and on and on won't live to see this.
But they'll come back.
When Mashiach comes, there'll be a resurrection of the dead, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but that's not for a long time. Even that, okay, I have to wait an awfully long time to come back if it's 3,000 plus years. So what exactly was he trying to tell them? Now, in the next few texts, in the last part for tonight's class, we're going to see the Rebbe has an insight to what exactly was it Yaakov. Now that we've kind of backed ourselves into a problem, what exactly was Yaakov trying to do? Now, in order to understand what Yaakov was trying to do, the Rebbe quotes from the Gemara, which is our next text, text 10a, to tell us that there are, in fact, two ways for Moshiach to come. There's two different possible outcomes for how the end of the days will arrive. Now, let's see what these two types of ways are. The source for these two ways is from the Talmud Tractate Sanhedrin, page 98 on the first side there. And the English translation of it reads that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked, "It is written regarding Mashiach's arrival in the book of Isaiah, in its time. Yet the verse continues, I will hasten it." So that's a contradiction, right? It'll happen in its time, but I'll make it happen faster. So which one is it? So the Gemara is going to try to resolve this contradiction. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, the answer is, if the Jewish people are worthy, I will hasten it. But if they're not worthy, then the redemption will come in its time. Rabbi Alexandri said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, it is written in the book of Daniel, and behold, with the clouds of the heaven, one like a man was coming. But elsewhere it is written, this is the book of Zechariah, humble and riding on a donkey. So again, you have two seemingly contradictory verses describing the end of days. So again, the answer is, if the Jewish people are worthy, then Mashiach will come with the clouds of heaven. But if they are not, he will come as one humble and riding on a donkey. So this piece of Gemara, this piece of Talmud, is resolving two similar contradictions. It'll come in time, but I'll hasten it. He'll come in a cloud, or he'll come on a donkey. Which is it? So they're not a contradiction, the Gemara resolves. In neither case is it a contradiction. It's talking about two separate modes, two separate ways that this could all end. It could end in its time if we're not worthy, or it could end if we are worthy in a way which is faster, a way which is more splendid. Now, on this same note, the same Gemara tells a fascinating story. That's text 10b. It says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi found Elijah, the prophet, standing at the entrance to the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he said to him, this is a familiar question from the beginning of the class, when will Mashiach come? Right? Who asked that question before? This is Yeshua ben Levi asking the question, but who asked this question before?
Baal Shem
The Baal Shem Tov. Very good. The Baal Shem Tov asked it of Mashiach. Now, we have the tradition that Eliyahu is going to come and tell us when Mashiach comes. So here it's a third party, but he's asking the same question, when will Mashiach come? Now, just as an aside, Baal Shem Tov is a great Talmud Chacham, and he's asking in the same language that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asks. So what's the answer? Here, it's not a riddle like when your wellspring is not conditional. Instead, he says, go and ask him. But where is he? At the entrance of the city. And how shall I know it is him? He's sitting among the poor lepers. All the others untie all their bandages at once to clean their wounds before retying them. But Moshiach unties, cleanses, and reties one wound at a time. That's how you'll know it's him. Thus should he be called upon, and he will not be delayed. Rabbi Yeshua went to Moshiach and said to him, peace upon you, my master and teacher. Moshiach responded, peace upon you, son of Levi. When will the Moshiach come? Today is the answer. So Yeshua went back to Eliyahu and went back to Elijah the prophet, and he said, Moshiach lied to me. For he said he would come today, but he didn't come. So Elijah solved the problem, just like our previous solutions to the contradictions. This is what he said to you. Today, if you listen to God's voice. So, this is, if you merit, then it's today. And if you don't merit, then it's not. So, this burning question, when will the Mashiach come? So the answer that the Gemara says is today. You want to know when Mashiach is going to come? You want to know all these answers? You want to know all the sages are telling us about the Kitzim and like that? What they're telling us is that if we do what is necessary to bring Mashiach, then Mashiach is going to come today. Mashiach will come today. Now, so this, the Rebbe explains, why do we bring this Gemara up? And this is the Rebbe's explanation as to what is it that Yaakov is trying to do. Yaakov is trying to tell his children a very powerful message. He's trying to tell us, not saying, I'm going to tell you with certainty about a date when Mashiach will come. Other people are going to come after me and give you guesses or educated guesses of when it's a good time for them to come. But I'm going to tell you certainly, it's thousands and thousands of years later. No. There is explaining from this Gemara we can understand that Yaakov had a very powerful twofold message for his sons. On the one hand, he gave them a message of hope, that we can bring Mashiach. You want to know when Mashiach is coming? When you do the work. And that's very empowering, because if we do the work, and when we do the work, then we can bring Mashiach. But it's also a very powerful responsibility, because what we see through the span of history is that without the work, it's very far away. If we just wait for it to happen, it's very far away at the same time. So the matter is in our hands, but we can't drop the responsibility. Now, so the lesson, a very important lesson, which the Rebbe uses in the next text of the Rebbe, is that there's a balance between good and evil, light and dark, and that we can learn lessons about goodness and light by, to use your term, reverse engineering from things that are dark. Now, the Rebbe says, and as an example of something we can learn from, the power of good, the power of the good work that we do. Yaakov's message is that if we do the work, then Mashiach is going to come. That's what the Gemara is telling us. So the same, we can learn the power of the effect of our good deeds from also the power of negativity. Now, what's the story? The story is now, this is already a Shmos story. This is from this week's Parsha. The Jewish people had it tough in Egypt. Slavery in Egypt was hard. That's the very beginning of this week's Torah portion. Now, why were we slaves in Egypt? Now, not the cause and effect reason. What was the bigger cause for why? You know, if you remember, there's a story with Hashem and Abraham, right? Mm-hmm. The real reason for Egyptian slavery, and we kind of put it into a story, it seems like the story is the reason, but the real reason for the Egyptian slavery is when Abraham was promised by God in the the covenant of the parts, that the land of Israel will be given to his children. That's their destiny. But another part of their destiny was to be slaves in a land that's not their own for 400 years. Now, there's a calculation which is made. If you look at all the dates and the ages and all the different things that the Torah gives us the details, you can work out through the math problem that they were really only in Egypt for a little more than half that time, 210 years. So if the cause ultimately for Egyptian slavery was this promise of God to Abraham that we will be slaves in a land not our own, and it would be for 400 years, then what happened that it really only was in practicality 210 years. So one answer which is given is that qualitatively the suffering of Egypt was so bad that it was like they were there for 400 years, even though it was only 210. These 210 were so long because of the suffering, it was like they were 400 years. So if there's balance between good and evil and dark and light, if we see the profound effect of a bad experience can speed up time, then how much more so, or how much certainly is the case to the other side, that if we would do our work qualitatively in the realm of good, in the realm of light, then we could also speed up the time frame for the end of days. There's a deep message about this balance, about how the world works. So that's text 11. Text 11 from, I read this out loud and then it didn't, let me catch up to the text 11. The text 11 from the Rebbe, so let's see the text. It says, Yaakov's intention of telling his sons about Moshiach's coming was this. If the Jewish people would know that Moshiach's arrival is hinged upon their merit, they would increase their divine service so as to hasten the redemption before its set time. As the Talmud states, if the Jewish people are worthy, I will hasten it. Indeed, so it was in the Exodus from Egypt. One of the reasons the Jews were enslaved for 210 years instead of the 400 years set at the covenant of the parts is that the harshness of their slavery made up what was lacking in years. Quality instead of quantity, right? So if the harshness of slavery caused the Exodus from Egypt to come sooner, certainly an increase in good deeds will also bring the redemption sooner. So now the Rebbe has an answer for what Yaakov was trying to achieve by revealing the time of redemption to his children. He was showing them how everything depends on their actions. Now, this intent of showing them everything depends on their actions was ultimately to motivate them to do the work, to pressure them with this sense of responsibility that they can make the day that we're all waiting for come sooner. So if this is a message of empowerment, it wasn't to make them feel terrible and let them know it's thousands of years you're going to have to wait. It's like, you could make it happen today. It's all in your hands to empower them. If this was a message, if we think about it this way, then, well, why did God not want them to know? When we think of it as like God, Jacob is revealing something that's going to happen so far in the future, and if the times that they're allowed to make kitzim is in order to encourage people, there's no encouragement from knowing it's going to be thousands of years ahead. So that's not what Yaakov meant to do. So everybody's resolving that problem by saying what Yaakov meant to do is give him this powerful lesson of that it's all in your hands. It's up to you to do the work. Be inspired. Do the hard work. So if that's the case, the way that I was explaining it, then now we have a question on why should God conceal this matter? If the whole point of the revelation that Yaakov wanted to give at the end of his life was to empower them to do the work, that seems like a good thing. Why shouldn't they be inspired by understanding that the work's on them? That's our last question. Any suggestions of how to solve this last problem? I mean, empowerment sounds good, right? Why not?
But it's still not guaranteed. Well, still, you have to understand what the empowerment is, I guess. So it's sort of like, if you're empowered, you can have an effect.
Right.
But you don't know how much or how little or exactly what it is.
Even with empowering, it might be too long.
Right. Okay.
Who knows? Because too long or not too long, it's subjective.
Right.
Even if you empowered something to reach something fast, that fast could be 4,000 years.
Right. fast could feel really slow, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good idea. Anything else? Any other ideas?
Plus, I mean, you can put a certain date to it anyways, because then we have free choice. I mean,
Right,
I want Moshiach from somebody else doesn't want Moshiach.
right. And then I have to do all of his work or her work,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
it's not just like.
And not only my work, I have to do theirs also, right?
But like you said, you can make it happen, but you can't.
Right.
Because you by yourself, you can't. It's everybody.
Okay.
You have to be on the same
Yeah,
page.
yeah, that's tough, right?
I mean,
Right, how's it
I
gonna
don't
go?
see
Two
when it's
Jews
gonna-
and three opinions,
I
right?
don't
A
see
bit
when
discouraging
it's
to
gonna
find
happen.
out.
Yeah.
Well, the flip side of it sort of being if you might be doing enough of the work to make it happen, and somebody else is pushing the goalpost back the other
Yeah.
direction.
Mhm.
So
Right.
you have to offset them. But the flip side of it is the comment that, but you only need so much between everybody, and you might be the one who tips it over the edge.
Right.
They won't, but you would because they're not doing anything. So it sort of does matter what you're doing, even if they're not doing it, because you might be all that's needed to make the difference.
Right. All right, these are all good ideas. Now, so one way to approach this problem, one way that it kind of helps us understand this approach is for Moshiach to come. It's all in our hands. We're going to take this message of empowerment. For Moshiach to come, we have to really want for him to come. It's not just enough to know that we can do the work and that the outcome is dependent on our work, but we have to, from our own decision, from our own choice, from our own initiative, we have to want for that outcome to happen.
And when you say we, it's everybody.
Yeah,
Absolutely everybody.
That's right.
Like you want it. But
That's right. Everyone has to want it to happen. Now, one of the things we said earlier in the class tonight is that, in a certain way, when things are really hard, when you're facing expulsion from Spain, when you're facing pogroms in Russia, when you're facing a Holocaust in Europe, you're facing times to be wiped out, you know, we said you could go a few different ways. One way is you could go like, well, I lost my faith because of all the suffering, and I need to know that Moshiach is coming to keep me going forward. Another way that you could react to such difficulty is you could really want it to stop. You could really want the promise of redemption and the beauty of redemption. Now, we have a different kind of problem that Rebbe talks about. Rebbe talks about it in one of it, and his last mimer talks about how when a Jew is being crushed by external forces, then it's somewhat natural for their sense of godliness and sense of light to come out. We have a different kind of problem. Our problem is that we might be comfortable here in exile. You know, there's like a new iPhone just came out this year, and pretty soon the cars are going to be driving themselves. And you know, you can get really delicious food delivered to your house now. You know, I don't have to even go grocery shopping anymore. I just go on my phone and I type in a few buttons, and then an hour later, magically, all the food appears and like that. Like things seem pretty good, relatively. You know, and learn some Jewish history. Like right now, it seems great. I got a magazine in the mail this week, and it says President-in-Law. And it has a picture of Jared Kushner's face, you know. You have like a Jew in unprecedented power, you know. He's the special advisor to the president, you know, this 35-year-old Orthodox Jewish man, you know. So what could be better than that? So we have a different kind of problem. Do we want Mashiach to come in this relative comfort and peace and advancement of technology and, you know, but what the idea for tonight's class, you'll see soon in the text, is that it's up to us. Not only is that we have to know that we're empowered to do the work, but we have to want to do the work. Now, remember, why I'm saying all this is to kind of resolve why would God want to hide from Yaakov's children? Why would God want to frustrate Yaakov's intention to reveal this powerful message that it's up to us to bring Mashiach? So, the first part of the answer is because we have to want Mashiach to come. The idea of redemption has to be human initiative. And let's talk a little bit about what this redemption means and what it means human initiative. So we have other redemptions in Jewish history. The prototype for redemption is Egypt. The Exodus from Egypt was a form of redemption. But that redemption was followed by exile. There was hundreds of years of struggle, but ultimately after leaving Egypt, went 40 years in the desert, and then hundreds of years to conquer the land of Israel, and then we had 400 good years in a temple built by Solomon. But ultimately, it wasn't meant to be. Less than 1,000 years after Egyptian redemption, we were back in exile. Now that exile was relatively short, less than 100 years. We came back and built the second temple, another good 400-year run, and now we're back in exile. So one of the qualities that's unique about the coming redemption is that it will be permanent. That's unique. The redemption will be permanent. Now, the other redemptions prior to this coming redemption were temporary. When we think about it from this perspective, permanent versus temporary, now we can begin to understand the importance of initiative, human initiative, that we should want it. See, there's a difference between something that is earned and something that is given. The other redemptions in Jewish history were things that were given to us. They were imposed by God, so to say. The coming redemption, why we have to want it, why we have to earn it, why we have to do the work, is because that's the secret to it being an eternal redemption. That's the next text.
Well, wait a minute. That begs the question. Didn't obviously the folks who were in exile in Babylon certainly wanted
right
a redemption just like we would.
But they didn't earn it.
But they weren't doing anything to earn it, whereas we have the opportunity. They didn't understand the fact that they had to earn it. They were just waiting around for it to happen.
Right. So that's the formula. It's not enough to want it. You have to earn it. And it's not enough to earn it. You have to want it. And when you have the two together, when it's your desire, when it's your initiative, and when you do the work because of your desire, that's what will ultimately lead up. That's the perfect formula to it being eternal. Now, this is the text which I've referred to before, that I was kind of helping us solve this problem. When one's godly service is done with divine input and not with his own efforts, it will not endure. For once the divine assistance ceases, he will naturally fall from his current level. Only when one's service is done by his own efforts will it endure and bring about the final everlasting redemption, after which there can be no exile. Now, I'll give you a story. A story I heard from one of my rabbis. So I told you about the Mitzvah, I told you about the campaigns, right, of the Rebbe. So one campaign was Mitzvah Torah. The Rebbe had a campaign. He wanted his Chassidim to go out and learn Torah with people. It's a big, powerful mitzvah. So one of the things the Chassidim do is try to go out and make classes and teach Chassidus and teach Torah and get people to learn, right? So one of my teachers in yeshiva in Israel, where I learned, he was a chassid of the Rebbe, and he knew about this campaign, and he's pushing for people to learn. So he said, some people take to it, and they want to come to a class. I'm talking to people here at a class. Some people are attracted, right? But some people, it's just hard to reach them. So he talked about something that was a very fascinating concept to illustrate this idea. He said in 1991, during the Gulf War, you remember back now, it felt so long ago, 25 years ago, 26 years ago, Super Bowl time, yeah, so it was like 26 years ago. The first President Bush, you had Iraqi Scud missiles were raining down on Israel. I don't remember the exact number, but I think something in the neighborhood of like 200 Scud missiles flew down, from the sky into heavily populated areas. They were aiming for Tel Aviv. And a miracle took place. They were worried about chemical warfare. It was landing these missiles in populated areas. And the miracle that took place is that no one died. No one was killed as a result of these attacks. There was one person who died from complications of the stress from the collapsing of a building, but that was a great period of time after it happened. But really, no one was killed because of this. This was seen in Israel at the time as a miracle, especially because there was no chemical warfare. People were getting fitted for gas masks and rushing to shelters. Nothing. This was seen as a miracle. So the rabbi explains to me in the story that here he was for years working on Mitzvah Torah, trying to get people to learn Torah. People who for years told him no, they never wanted to come to a class. Now all of a sudden, the miracle of the Scud missiles, they show up next week for class. A revelation like this of godliness, this brought them to class.
Not too far from the expression, there's no atheists in a box.
Exactly.
Literally, this is pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the way the rabbi explained, though, is that these people who came as a result of this revealed miracle, they came, they were interested, they were, inspired by the miracle, but it didn't take long for the inspiration to wear off. And they, needless to say, they stopped coming to the class once the inspiration wore off, and whatever it is they heard didn't have a lasting impact, a change in their life. It was the people who were coming to the class not because of a miracle, but because they wanted to. They made the choice to learn more and to work on it. And they made slow progress. But whatever progress they made as a result of their learning, that was internalized. That changed them. That had an eternal quality to it. So this story is illustrating this concept over here. When God gives us something, even if it's something as profound as a miracle and redemption, it doesn't last. But when we work to earn something, that's when it lasts. That's when it's eternal. So when it says that we have to want Mashiach, and we have to earn Mashiach, the reason why that's such a powerful message, such a powerful, both inspiring and powerful for the responsibility of it, is that this redemption that's coming, that we're working towards, is an eternal redemption. And in order for it to be eternal, it can't be something that God just gives to us. It's up to us. Now, in light of that we have to earn it, now we begin to understand, I'm going to skip over text 13a because we're getting a little bit late, but now we begin to understand the debate between Yaakov and God. See, Yaakov was this loving father. He wanted to give his children the secret. It's all up to you. If you'll do the work, then you'll bring Moshiach. If not, it could be a really long time, right? Or it's 3,522 years later, and we're still waiting. But he gave them the secret. If you'll do the work, it'll come today, as the Gemara says. Now, this knowledge of the need for the work is a debate between God. Is that knowledge earning it, or is it imposed? This profound lesson, if we are told this by Yaakov on his deathbed, is that in the form of it being imposed, or is it earned? So yeah, God wins the argument, right? It's hard to argue with God. So when God takes the message away out of Yaakov's mouth, it's because that already has the force of imposition. That already has the force of revelation. And God felt that this pressure, the Rebbe explains, would detract from the human effort which is required to bring the eternal redemption. Redemption will come, but it's from our conviction. It's from our wanting it. And that's the what's going on here with Yaakov and Hashem. So we have to wake up, we have to want it, and when we do want it, Mashiach will come right away. Let's just skip over here. So this is the last text of the night. This is the summary of the idea over here. Yaakov wanted us simply to leave the exile as soon as possible. Perhaps redemption would not be the most complete, but it would come quickly. And this is the meaning of bikesh. That Yaakov had a bakasha, a request. That Yaakov's intention was to request from God to hasten the coming of the end time. But God wants the redemption to be perfectly complete, which can only happen if the Jewish people's efforts to hasten its arrival is also complete. Therefore, the Shekhinah departed from him to allow for a more complete redemption. So for the redemption to be complete, it can't be forced. That's a process. That's a process for us to want it. And in order for us to see this process, the lesson that we see is it's something that we pray for every day. So 1/3 of the 18 blessings of the Shemona Esrei are related directly to the coming of Moshiach. So we have to go through the repetition. We have to go through the message. We have to develop the yearning. It's through prayer, and it's through the discontent of how it is now. It's not feeling comfortable in exile. It's not feeling at home in exile. By developing that yearning, by developing that conviction on our own terms, that's what empowers us to take a personal initiative, a collective personal initiative. And through that work, that's what brings the eternal redemption. All right, any questions?
The only gap in there in the back of my mind, I just thought of is Jacob should have known that. should have been well enough known. So it's sort of like not only did the information get taken away from him, but the knowledge of what the implication was and why it was taken away, because he doesn't mention, you understood why later on.
Right.
That was taken away as well, or you would have figured out this is kind of stupid for me to do this.
Right.
Do it. You didn't know
the shortcut I'm going to try to take. Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting just to speak a little bit. You're right at this point, but just a little bit to balance it out. It says that the midah of Yaakov, the attribute of Yaakov, is that of Tiferes.
Kindness.
Yeah, it's mercy. Yeah. Chesed is kindness. That's Abraham, and then Yitzchak was gevura, severity.
So focused on the mercy of it, and got lost in the details of the other people.
It was typical of his character to be merciful to his children. See, because the message you've been saying tonight is true. Like, ultimately we have to want it. It's just taking a long time for us to want it. And so, parents, if we're parents and you have children, you want your children to appreciate the value of that which is earned, right? But you would like to speed them up to learning that lesson. If there's some way I could get you faster to that conclusion, it would make your life much better. But I realize that you have to come to that conclusion on your own. But as your parent, I want to do everything I can to kind of set you up to learn that as quickly as possible. That's Yaakov. Yaakov is this parent of the Jewish people, and his attribute is the attribute of mercy. So even though he knows that it's best if they earn it, he kind of wants them to earn it faster. But it's a good point they're making. All right, any questions from home?
Was there? Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
After you.
So is it only Jewish people who have to want it?
No.
It's the Jewish people effort.
Yeah. It's just that we play what we'll call like a leading indicator, a role as a leading indicator. We have to take what's been revealed to us in the Torah, internalize it, and do the work, but ultimately it's for all of mankind. We see from throughout the books of the prophets that when Moshiach comes, it's a universal redemption.
Was there wasn't there someone that said they were Moshiach during the Inquisition or somewhere around there?
There's been, just as there's been, I'd call it missed predictions of when Moshiach will come, there's been also a rich history of false Moshiachs. That's people who have not only predicted a time, but assumed the position of Moshiach, so to say, as themselves being the Redeemer. So just like unfortunately the predictions are wrong, so too these assertions.
You know who I'm talking about? I can't think.
Shabbatai Tzvi,
Yeah,
you're probably talking about.
Tzvi.
Yeah, that's the
And
famous
he ended up converting to
one.
Catholic Church.
No, it's a Muslim.
Oh.
It converted to Islam. Yeah, it's a sad chapter in Jewish history.
One of the screenwriters in the movie The Wizard of Oz was Jewish. And the lines at the end of it, where the character is saying, I should have thought of this myself, and then the Wicked Witch is saying, no, you had to come to the conclusion yourself. No one could have told you. Sort of like, well, you could have gotten home at any time by using the ruby slippers,
right?
But you had to want it and learn it on your own. You couldn't just have this trip back. Well, that's where the writers were getting this from. And then take stuff from the Torah and make a movie out of small portions of it.
Yeah, you're right.
It's almost the same line.
Yeah, it has to come from us.
Yep.
All right, so I'm glad to be back at it and learning Torah together again. God willing, we'll continue next week. Yeah.
Is next week a new semester?
Yeah, next week we'll start the new season. God willing.
Okay.
All right. Have safe trip home, everybody.
That was something with you or the children?
No, it was me.